right, it's that time of year again. The Christmas lights are going up, the heaters are going on, but those can be dangerous. Mallory West joins us now live to talk about the possible dangers. Mallory?
Jennifer, I am here in Candy Cane Lane, and it is that time of year, like you said. Christmas lights are going up, and there is nothing better than cuddling by a fire in the cold weather or even snow. But these things can come with some dangers. According to a 2020 report from the American Fire Association, an average of 770 fires are caused by Christmas lights each year.
One of the biggest things that we see is the extension cords. They'll plug this into an extension cord. That's what causes the fire.
That number is small compared to the fires started by heaters. The Consumer Product Safety Commission says both fixed and portable heaters are associated with about 21,800 residential fires every year. Dusty Harris with the Ouachita Parish Fire Department says there are ways to keep this from happening.
First and foremost is your space heater should always be plugged directly into the wall. Another way of saying that is you should never ever use an extension cord on your space heater. Another thing that you need to keep in mind is to make sure that you have a 3-foot circumference around the space heater where combustible items cannot come in contact with the space heater.
Antonio Smith with the Monroe Fire Department says working fire alarms are always key in the event of a fire.
You're going to get early detection, especially when you're asleep. That's very important. So you get that early notification that there's smoking inside of the home. It's going to alert you, and should have time to escape safely.
Both the Ouachita Parish Fire Department and Monroe Fire Department offer fire alarms and tips on installation.
Don't become complacent. Make sure you're inspecting your smoke alarm. Make sure that it works properly, and just taking all the precautions necessary, whether it be cooking or hanging your lights for Christmas, or even with your space heater, to make sure that everything is operating the way that it's supposed to, and you're taking every step that you can to prevent something from happening.
And both the Ouachita Parish Fire Department and Monroe Fire Department say don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions about fire safety. In Candy Cane Lane, I'm Mallory West.